Hello everyone, it's me Uncle John. Today I am going to read Magic Tree Hours number 19 S5 5035 Tigers at Twilight by Mary Pope Osborne. Chapter 6 Swamp Creature. Caw, caw, ah, ah, ah. Jack slowly came out of his dream. He opened his eyes with a start. He was surrounded by hazy sunlight. Where am I? He thought in a panic. Then he remembered he was in India on an elephant's back. He sat up. Through the haze, he saw that Saba was standing on a muddy stream bank. Jack yawned. Where was Annie? The other elephants were upstream. They sprayed water on each other with their trunks. Teddy, Car, and Co were at the edge of the forest. Teddy snipped the tall grass. The langurs ate flowers. Good morning, called Annie. She was sitting on a big black rock downstream. She was barefoot and soaking wet. Hi, said Jack. How did you get down? Teddy and I slid off Saba into the mud, said Annie. Try it, but throw down your sneakers and backpack first. Eddie went to Saba's side. Her feet were buried in mud up to her ankle. Jack threw his things to Annie. Then he patted Saba's rough, wrinkled skin. Thanks for the ride, he said softly. The elephant touched him one last time with her trunk. Jack slid down her side, feet first, and fell into the mud. He caught himself with his hands. They sank into the mud past his wrist. His glasses were splattered too. Wash off in the stream, Annie said. She put Jack's pack and shoes on the rock while Jack waded into the cool water. He washed the mud off his hands and feet. He rinsed off his glasses. Then he looked around. Saba had joined the rest of the herd. He washed the mud off his hands and feet. He rinsed off his glasses. Then he looked around. Saba had joined the rest of the herd. The elephants looked beautiful in the morning mist. Everything looked beautiful. Yellow and blue water birds spread their wings. Mossy hanging vines swayed in the breeze. Huge white flowers floated on top of the stream. Then Jack saw a strange sight. It looked like a horn and two ears sticking out of the water. One ear flicked away a fly. There's a weird creature out here, he called to Annie. It looks like it has a horn. Annie waded into the stream. I better check the book, said Jack. He hurried to his pack, wiping his wet hands on his t-shirt. He pulled out the Indian book. There was a picture of a horn sticking out of the water. He read, the one-horned rhinoceros, or rhino, washes in a forest stream. Rhinos are not usually dangerous, but because they do not see well, they sometimes charge at things by mistake. A loud noise will usually stop them. Jack felt sorry for the rhino. Too bad animals can't wear glasses, he thought. He read more. The Indian rhino is a very endangered animal. This means that there are not many left. People called poachers kill them and sell their body parts as medicine and good luck charms. Jack started to take out his notebook. Just then, a slurpy, sloshing sound came from the water. Whoa, said Annie. Jack looked up. The rhino rose from the stream. He looked like an ancient swamp creature. Oh man, said Jack. The rhino peered at Annie with his tiny eyes. Then he snorted and lowered his head. His horn pointed right at Annie. Make a loud noise, Jack yelled. Annie clapped her hands and shouted. We come in peace. The rhino stopped. He grunted. Then he sank back into the water. Annie laughed. Phew, said Jack. I better take some notes about that big guy. Arf, arf! Teddy barked from the edge of the forest. And I better get Teddy, said Annie. She hurried out of the stream and ran to get the dog. Jack pulled out his notebook and wrote one-horned rhino on endangered animal needs glasses. Jack, shouted Annie. She was racing toward him with Teddy at her heels. Come quick, what's wrong? He said. We found something terrible. Annie was close to tears. Really terrible. Chapter 7 Trapped. Jack threw his things into his pack and followed Annie to the forest edge. Teddy stayed close to them, whining. Kai and Co bounced around, chattering nervously. As Jack got closer, he saw a tiger. The tiger was lying on his side, completely still. His eyes were closed. His front paw was caught in a trap. Is he dead? Said Jack. No, he's still breathing, Annie said. A tear ran down her cheek. He is worn out from struggling. He must have gotten caught last night. That's the sad sound we heard. What can we do? Said Jack. We have to free him, said Annie. She started toward the tiger. Wait, wait. Jack grabbed her. Tigers eat people, you know. He took a deep breath. Let's see what the book says first. Hurry, said Annie. Jack opened their Indian book. He found a chapter called The Tiger Traps. He read, Poachers catch Indian tigers with steel traps. This is against the law. After trapping a tiger, they kill it and sell the body parts for money. Like the rhino, the tiger is a very endangered species. If the killing does not end, they both face extinction. Extinction means that someday there may be no Indian tigers or rhino left on Earth. Oh man, we do have to save him, said Jack. Under the writing was a picture of a steel trap used to catch tigers. Jack studied it. It looked horrible and deadly. Okay, he said. He showed the picture to Annie. Here's the plan. I'll push down on this part. The trap will spring up open. Then you pull his leg out. Got it? Got it, said Annie. Sit, Teddy, the little dog said. The Longors watched silently as Jack and Annie moved closer to the tiger. He was the most majestic creature Jack had ever seen. His huge head was a dark orange color. He had perfect black and white stripes around his white face. The leg in the ugly steel trap was bleeding. Slowly, silently, Jack pushed down the lever. He raised the bar off the tiger's leg. The tiger kept slipping. Slowly, silently, Annie freed the tiger's leg. She stroked his fur gently. Get well, she whispered. The tiger didn't move. Slowly, silently, Jack and Annie stood up. They turned around. They started tiptoeing back toward the long gorse. Coo, 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 runned Ka and Co. Jack and Annie turned back. The tiger was on his feet. He stared right at them. His eyes seemed to glow. Jack looked about wildly. How could they escape? Tiger snarled at Jack and Annie. Then slowly, silently, he started toward them. Huge tiger limped closer and closer to Jack and Annie. Jack clapped his hand. We come in peace, he shouted, but the tiger didn't turn away. His eyes blazed, his lip curled. Arf, arf. Teddy barked fiercely at Annie. Teddy says, run and hide, said Annie. She grabbed Jack's hand and pulled him over to the bank. Wait, what about Teddy? He cried. Don't worry, Annie said. She pulls Jack down behind the black rock. What about Teddy? Jack asked again. He's okay, he told me, said Annie. Jack heard Teddy's barks turn to fierce growl. Arf, arf, grr, grr. The growls grew louder and louder. That doesn't sound like Teddy, said Jack. Then suddenly there was a silence, a strange silence. Teddy, Annie asked. Now she sounded worried. Annie raised her hand. She and Jack both peered over the rock. Teddy stood tall and brave in the grass. Tiger was limping away. He disappeared between the trees. All the forest seemed to hold its breath until Annie broke the silence. Teddy, you're a wonderful wonder dog, she said. The long girls clapped and jumped up and down. Arf, arf! Teddy was just like a small, scruffy dog again. He wagged his tail and ran to Annie and Jack. Annie scooped him into her arms. You saved us, she said. How did you drive away that tiger? Asked Jack, rubbing Teddy's head. Did you turn into a wild dog? Teddy just panted and licked them both. Jack pushed his glasses into place and looked back at the forest. Well, I guess we won't be getting a thank you gift from the tiger, he said. And he laughed. I guess not, she said. I wonder where our gift is. And I wonder where the treehouse is, said Jack. Ka and Co chattered at Jack. Then they bounded down the bank, waving their arms. They want us to follow them again, said Annie. Come on. She and Jack grabbed the things off the rock. They hurried down the stream after the long oars. The water shimmered in the early light. Silverfish leaped into the air. Teddy bounded ahead with Ka and Co. Soon they disappeared around the bend. Jack and Annie followed them. When they went around the bend, they saw a man sitting cross-legged on a rock. The long girls sat close to him. The man's eyes were closed. He had long white hair and a long white beard. His skin was brown. He looked very peaceful. Chapter 9. The Hermit. Ka and Co smoothed the man's hair with their little paws and patted his cheeks gently. The man smiled and whispered to the long girls. His eyes stayed closed. Teddy walked up to the man and licked his hand. The man still didn't open his eyes, but he stroked Teddy's fur. Knock, knock, Annie said softly. Is there someone there? The man asked. He turned his face toward Jack and Annie. Now his eyes were open, but he didn't seem to see them. Jack realized that the man was blind. Hi, I'm Annie, said Annie. And I'm Jack, said Jack. The blind man smiled. Good, he said, nodding. Would you like to visit with me? Sure, said Annie. She and Jack sat down next to the man. Do you live in this forest? Annie asked. Yes, he said. Are you a hermit? Jack asked. Yes, the blind man said. What's a hermit? Said Annie. Hermits live far away from other people, said the blind man. They like to be alone to think. I live in the forest, so I can learn from nature. How do you learn? Asked Jack. I listen, said the blind man. Listen to what? Asked Jack. To the chatter of the monkey, the rumble of the elephant, the roar of the tiger, said the man. I have listened for so long, they have all begun to sound like one voice, the one great voice of the forest. Did the voice tell you that a tiger got caught in a trap last night? Asked Danny. Yes, the hermit said. And did it tell you that after we saved him, he tried to attack us? Said Jack. The blind man smiled. Please bring me one of the white flowers floating on the stream. Jack wondered why the hermit was changing the subject, but Annie jumped up and hurried to the stream. She pulled at one of the large flowers. It came off, muddy, root and all. She took it to the blind man. Thank you, he said. The man touched the flower's large white petals and its dirty root. This perfect lotus blossom grows from dark, thick mud, he said. Its beauty cannot live without its ugliness. Do you understand? Yes, said Jack and Annie. When you saved the tiger, you saved all of him, said the blind man. You saved his graceful beauty and his fierce, savage nature. You cannot have one without the other. Oh, right, said Jack. Take this lotus as a thank you gift from all the forest for saving our fierce friend, said the blind man. Our world would not be complete without him. And he took the gift from the hermit, a gift from a forest far away, she said. Arf, arf, Teddy wagged his tail. The longhorns clucked. We can go home now, said Jack, if we can just find a way. Do not worry, said the blind man. Your house in the trees is close by. The elephants walked in a large circle. So you're back at the place where you studied. Really? Said Jack. The blind man pointed to the sky. There was a magic tree house high in a nearby tree. Oh, great, breathed Jack. I told you not to worry, said Annie. She and Jack pulled on their socks and shoes and stood up. Before they left, Annie touched the hand of the blind man. Thanks for everything, she said. The man held her hand for a moment. Then he took Jack's hand. Jack felt a wave of calm wash over him. Thank you, he said to the blind man. Kai and Co chattered and held out the long arm. Jack and Annie hugged the two langurs. We'll miss you, said Annie. You were a great tour guide, said Jack. Goodbye. Then he and Annie took off for the magic tree house, with Teddy scampering after them. At the rope ladder, Jack put Teddy into his pack and climbed up. Annie carried the lotus blossom as she followed them. Inside the tree house, Jack picked up the Pennsylvania book. But before he made a wish, he looked out the window. With Annie in the distance, they saw Saba and the other elephants bathing in the stream. They saw Ka and Ko swinging on vines. They saw the tiger, Thun bathing in the grass, licking his sore leg. They saw tiny deer grazing. They saw bright birds in the tree. They saw the blind man sitting in front of his cave. He was smiling. Jack opened the book. He pointed to a picture of the Frog Creek woods. I wish we could go home, he said. The treehouse started to spin. Wind started to blow harder and harder. Then everything was still, absolutely still. Chapter 10. Who are you, really? Jack opened his eyes. Late afternoon, sunlight shined into the treehouse. Our third gift, said Annie. She put the lotus blossom beside a pocket watch from the Titanic and eagle's feather from Lakota Indians. One more gift, she said to Teddy, and you'll be free from your spell. The little dog licked her hand. Hey, tell me this, said Jack. How did you know Teddy wanted us to hide behind that rock? Annie shrugged. I just knew, she said. I think I saw it in his eyes. You did? Jack looked into Teddy's eyes. Little dog tilted his head and stared back at Jack. Teddy's eyes twinkled, as if they held many secrets. Who are you, really? Whispered Jack. Teddy just smiled a doggy smile and wagged his tail. Come for us again soon, Annie said. Okay. Teddy sneezed as if to say, of course. Jack grabbed his pack. Then he and Annie climbed down the rope ladder. When they stood on the ground, they looked up. A little black nose was poking out the treehouse window. Bye, they called. Off, off. Jack and Annie took off between the trees. The birds sang in the twilight. Squirrels scampered playfully through the leaves. The Frog Creek woods were very tame after forests in India. So they came to their street. As they walked to their house, last bit of a daylight was slipping away. Before they went inside, Jack and Annie sat on their step. I have two questions, said Jack. If the hermit couldn't see, how did he know about the tree house? And how did he know that we had traveled all night with the elephant? Easy. The one great voice of the forest told him. Said Jack. He closed his eyes for a moment and listened. He heard a car going down the street. He heard a woodpecker pecking. He heard cricket chirping. He heard a screen door opening. He heard a mom saying, time for dinner, kids. All the sounds were like one great voice, the one great voice of home. The end.